Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this is a special episode of the show because last week I had a chance to talk to Jenna and Rachel from the Friendly Local Game Pod about gaming with families, games that are appropriate for kids with a broad age range, and just games that might be fun to play when we're kind of stuck at home on staycations instead of being able to travel. Here's the interview. Hopefully you'll enjoy it.
My name is Jenna. I am a high school science teacher. I just completed my 10th year of teaching. Crazy enough it is. We did actually finish the school year, kind of. And I teach mostly upper level classes and only life science. So not so much physics and chemistry. I like the life science kind of stuff. Biology, anatomy, environmental, all that kind of good stuff is more up my alley. I taught for 5 years at a small school in Iowa, and I'm originally from Iowa. And then I got married and we moved up here, and I've been teaching for 5 years here at a small school. I typically say in the smaller schools, and I mean small, we've got, generally 40 to 50 kids per grade level. Small. But I like knowing every kid that walks across at graduation. I appreciate being able to have been part of their education at some point. My husband and I got into board games when we moved up here, actually. That's how I met Rachel. We went to a board game night 4 years ago, I suppose, and started playing Pandemic Legacy at a new board game store that had just opened in a town not too far from where we live. I live out in the woods. If I were to open the window back there, you'd see lots of trees. And so we have to drive a little ways, but we met Rachel and her husband, Jacques, at Gathering Games in Richmond, Wisconsin. And we really haven't looked back. We did not have this many games that long ago, so we have dived headlong into the obsession very quickly. But it has been a wonderful chance for us to meet people, to socialize, to, get off our technology and just enjoy other people's company. And that's kind of where I'm at. I grew up on a farm. My parents still live back there. We go visit once in a while, once a month about, if we can, during non-pandemic-y times. That's about it. That's me.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I grew up in a military family, so I'm from all over the place. And my family is very close, obviously. When you're a military family, you are your friend group, And I played games growing up, a few games, the standard, Battleship, Monopoly. But as I was growing older, I didn't really care for games. I'm like, I don't want to play Monopoly again, And then I started working for Borders and Borders Books, and we had a few games there. And they're no longer in business, but then I met my husband as well, and my husband loves games. And so we played video games together. I'd never really played video games. It wasn't really a thing in our house. And we started playing things like Killer Bunnies and lots of role-playing games. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of started our love of gaming. And there's a comic book store called The Source in St. Paul. Big store. They also have a fairly large board game and role-playing game section. And so because of the crossover in our interests, we wound up picking up more and more games. And then we started going to the Gathering Games in New Richmond. And that's where I met Jenna. And eventually, through a series of events, I became a part owner of the Gathering Games. So I have my full-time job as a cube worker, and then at night I work as a game store superhero. So
awesome. Wow. And you're also putting up information about games online.
Yes. Yep, we just
started
our podcast.
Yeah, ironically on April Fool's Day in the middle of a pandemic, because what better time to start a podcast? Yeah.
In a way, it was fortunate because it was like, well, Jenna, now we don't have an excuse. We're home. We can figure out how all this technology works and get started. So,
That's for sure.
Right, and you already had the games in the background, and, and we all needed a distraction from the pandemic, so
that is
games definitely come in handy for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Now, Jenna, you said that you had an email from a parent recently, and I think I agree with you that this would be a good segue into what we're going to talk about today. So can you tell me a little bit about the message that you received?
Yes, it's actually from a family that we are somewhat country neighbors with, which means they're, like 3 miles away, but close enough. And they have 5 kids, and they also love to play games. All their kids do. And so their mom was looking for some games that all of them could play. They have 5 kids and 2 adults, so that's 7. And then there's a couple significant others. Now couple of the kids are older. And so they were up to 9, which was really stretching my limits of games that I know that are good for 9 players. But we did come up with a couple that I think would be good for them. Unfortunately, the one that we originally Forgotten Waters, which if you haven't played that yet, it's wonderful. Our group ate it up and played so many hours of that game. But Forgotten Waters only plays up to 7. But if the adults sat out, the kids could all play that together and whatever. So she was looking for games that her family could play on their little staycation. Since they couldn't go anywhere, they were going to kind of turn their house into a little vacation spot and try to do some different things. So I think she was going to use some of the money they were going to use to travel to purchase a couple games that they could kind of all play together. And so, so that's what got us kind of on our topic that we're going to touch on today.
For 9 players and of varying ages, right? Because when it's one family, right, it's not like everybody the same age. That makes it extra challenging.
It does. So their youngest is 4th or 5th grade, all the way up to junior in college. So they've got big range of kids.
They really put you to the test.
They did, but I did come up with a couple that I thought would work. I came up with just one, which I thought they might have to add a couple pieces of paper and other things to write on, but I thought that would be a lot of fun for them to play as a family. And the other one I came up, which is a little older, so they might have to help the youngest, is Cartographers. But I thought she would get a kick out of drawing and doing some of the fill-in for that flip and write game. So those were the 2 that I came up with that would pretty much account for all of them.
Wow. Okay. So tell me a little bit about just one, because I know a little bit about Cartographers. I met one of the people over there at the publisher of Cartographers, but I know nothing at all about just one.
Oh my gosh. So just one, I mean, Rachel can probably explain it too, because we both love this game, but Just One is a party game that it's goofy and it's silly, but you flip up a card in front of you, and if you're the person that's going, you don't actually look at what's on the front of the card. And there's going to be 5 words or 5 somethings, words, people, nouns, whatever, that are in front, and you just pick a number. So I would say, okay, 3. And that number might be, next to that number is a word that might be potato. Okay, so the rest of you know that the word you're trying to get me to say is potato. You have a little whiteboard in front of you and a dry erase marker that you write one word clue. No hyphens. It has to be one word.
Can't be the same word in a different language.
Right. No cheating. It has to be one word. So I might decide I'm going to write on my board chip. Okay, so potato chip. Rachel might look at it and go, okay, I'm going to write russet. So russet potatoes. And then, Jordan, my husband, might look at his and he might go, okay, I'm going to do spud or whatever. But the trick is that if Jacques puts chip, we both have the same word. So we all show each other our words first before we show them to whoever's turn it is. And if any of ours match, you have to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to figure out words that will help the person figure out what the answer is, but you can't be too specific or easy because somebody else might already choose that. So you end up with these really obscure and goofy terms to describe something that you wouldn't normally necessarily think of all the time. And it gets really entertaining. It does force you to think outside the box. I don't want to just put the first thing that pops into my head because that's probably what everybody else is going to put. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most popular family games that I sell. It's so easy to teach. Anybody can play it, and I've never seen a group play it that wasn't laughing hysterically. So it's just a really great family game.
Okay. So Cartographers was the second one, and Cartographers I know like this much about. So you have to tell me all about Cartographers.
Rachel, I'll let you take this one.
Okay. Well, Cartographers is a roll and write, essentially like a flip and write. And you have a little grid, and there's a few different biomes or different land types, and then there are different rules for each phase of the game, and there's 4 different phases, so there's different rules for points, and they change each game. So it might be you want the largest contiguous group of forest to get points, or you are trying to surround towers with a certain landscape or something like that. So they're at the end of each phase, you're scoring the different objectives, and I believe you're scoring two different objectives each phase.
Yep.
So and then there are monsters in the deck that come out. And when the monsters come out, you have to pass your little map to the person next to you, and they get to draw on your map, and they draw monster spaces on your map, which can totally mess up whatever you've got going. So,
and the monsters count for negative, right? So like if you have to score them, they reduce your score.
They do. Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's a little bit of take that, but at the same time, it's more than just getting in somebody's way. You're thinking about like the best way to mess them up. So,
so there's strategy even in the take that part of the game.
Yes, and for such a simple concept, because it really is very simple and easy to teach, there's a lot of strategy involved in that game. And I think the only thing that I would recommend in playing that game is that some kids will have a hard time drawing the different landscapes because it's like a little tree or a little, river. And kids that have maybe don't have as good of fine motor skills you might want to get different colored pencils for them. To help them know what they drew or help you figure out what they drew. So
color code it. Yep.
Yeah, color code it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even if you have a large group, like say you had 10 people playing, what you could do is just separate into 2 groups of 5 and just be using the same cards for both sides. And then they would just compete amongst themselves. And that might make things a little easier if you needed to simplify. If you had 2 people that knew how to play the game, you could easily just kind of break it apart a little bit, and that would work too. It reminds me too, Rachel, of the game that we just played and talked about, Nerd Words.
Yes.
Which is probably would be the next step from Just One, actually. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely science related. So it's all science terms. But the trick with that one is that you get a science term like photon, and the clues that you give have to start with a letter that's in the word. So,
wow.
Yeah. So it gets very tricky very quickly when you're trying to figure that out.
But not the first letter.
Right, because the first letter is, you get 4 clues to give. And the first letter is the 4th clue that you're allowed to give. So that way they know what the first letter of the word is. That one is a challenge. Yeah.
Very challenging.
Yeah, with complicated words that not everybody's going to know the definitions.
Yes. Yeah. And the good thing about that one, though, is it comes with, first of all, it comes with a ton of vocabulary cards, but then it comes with a whole stack of blank ones. So if you have kids that are younger ages, you could definitely do more simple science concepts or even other fields of study.
So I know gateway games are a big deal at my house and with the families that I work with. Are there any other games that are sort of quick to teach that can play sort of with a range of interest or a range of ages that come to mind?
The one that I kind of had thought of right away, and this is one that I've brought out to play with my high school kids and they jump on it right away. I've brought it out to play with my nephews and they've jumped on it right away. And it's a very common one, but I think it's I'm a big fan of cooperative games, so Rachel's probably not surprised that I'm going to pick a cooperative game right away, but
no.
And that's Castle Panic.
Yes.
It's a very easy cooperative game. It might be a little intimidating to look at first, but once you get it out there and you set it up, it's really not hard, and there's a lot of talking to people around so you can help each other out. And if you've got a younger kid, that makes life a lot easier. You can help them out. And so it's just a good old fashioned, like, you're just fighting some orcs, like fighting orcs and trolls and trying to keep them from getting into the tower. And so that was kind of the one that I had initially thought of. And I think that actually plays up to 5 or 6. Of course, that side's not facing me, but but I know it plays up to a decent amount. But that was the one that immediately came to mind. Like if I, was going to sit down and play with my nephews or whatever, that's one that I would probably pull out right away. And I know they have My First Castle Panic, so they created a younger version. But to be honest, if you as an adult are playing with the younger kids, as long as they're not really little, I think you could probably make the normal Castle Panic work pretty well.
Absolutely. And that My First Castle Panic is really for the preschool age. It's shapes and colors, and teaching sharing. So
Okay.
that's helpful.
That's a good skill to know.
Yes, but I think adults would be a little bored playing that one for
Right.
too long. But the nice thing about any cooperative game is that if you have kids at multiple different ages, you can have them buddy up and work together if you have helpful older siblings. So.
Yes. It's a little harder to do that with a cooperative game like Magic Maze, where you're not allowed to talk to each other.
Oh, yeah.
And
That would
Yes.
be difficult.
You can only bang a wooden pawn in front of the person who has to do their work.
Yes.
Yes.
A little step up of a cooperative game is Forbidden Island. And my nieces and nephews have been playing that for quite a while with my parents. And my parents don't play a ton of complicated games, but that's one that they've been able to play and teach to their grandkids. As young as I believe that Ella started playing when she was around 6, and definitely they were helping her, but that's the great thing about cooperative games is you can help each other out.
My first instinct when we were talking about games to play at home, my first instinct for a cooperative game was Endangered, which is one of the newer games out from Grand Gamers Guild. And Endangered, you are trying to save an endangered species. It's got that very pandemic type feel to it. It's a great game, but it's definitely not one for a gateway gamer. It's one that if you've got older kids that like games, it'd be a great one to give them. I'm actually entertaining the idea of bringing it into my environmental classroom and having them create their own modules for it. So they would create a module for a new endangered species and have to try to figure out how to make that work in the context of a game. But Endangered is a game, you're just cooperatively trying to save an endangered animal, which is pretty cool.
Some games that I like to recommend to families, especially right now because kids are a little squirrely having been home for so long, are some games that also provide you with some activities. So things like Happy Salmon and Funky Chicken. And with those games, there's a stack of cards, and you can play with a big group with both of those games as well. And you have these cards in your hand, and you're flipping them over, and they have an action on them. And it's either for Happy Salmon, it's high five, pound it, switcheroo, where you have to switch places, and you're looking for somebody else with the same card. And so you're shouting out like, pound it, going around in a circle trying to find somebody else that has the same card that'll smack your hand, and then you can put that card behind and go on to the next card. And you're kind of trying to get through your whole deck before anybody else. So it's this just crazy, like everybody's shouting at once. Everybody's like swapping places and like reaching over each other. And but it's great for kids. I usually bring it out during the holidays when kids are, we're waiting for dinner, that sort of thing. Kids are getting bored. They're getting whiny. I'm like, okay, everybody, here's a stack of cards, gather around, and I've watched adults play it. It's hilarious. And so that's one that I recommend, especially right now when kids need some sort of recess activity, essentially. Get away from Zooming with their class and things like that. And so there's that one. There's also Ice Cool, which is, we've talked about before on our podcast, that has these little weeble wobble penguins that they're actually skipping class to get fish snacks and trying to avoid the hall monitor. And one person plays the hall monitor, and you're trying to flick them through different rooms. The box folds out into different rooms, and the hall monitor is trying to hit the other penguin players. And so with that one, you have to sort of run around the table to get the best shot and line up your shot. And because the penguins don't really, they're so bottom heavy, they don't really follow the rules of physics very logically. They they just do funny things because they're wobbly, and so that's a game where people usually are laughing the whole time they're playing too. So those are games I'm recommending right now with kids who are just, people are coming in saying, my kids are so bored, they're driving me crazy. I'm like, well, here's some good active games that they can play.
Right, that don't necessarily require close adult supervision to play
Right.
them.
Right.
It is sometimes hard to find games that'll get people moving around. I mean, we don't have gym classes anymore, so
Right.
it makes it a real challenge. The gyms are closed. For a long time the parks were closed. You couldn't do very much of anything physical. Jenna, do you have any physical activity games that you like to play as a family?
Well, I just did teach my mom and dad ice cool, and that was really fun because my mom and dad, we grew up in very much a card-playing family. I grew up playing cribbage, and we played hearts and pitch, and we definitely went that route when we were camping and that kind of stuff. So we taught my mom and dad ice cool, which was a lot of fun. So that one is the same for me. Really, the only other one that I have that's probably more active would probably be. I mean, we have our crokinole board, but you do stay pretty stationary on that one. And I know you were talking about you've got a crokinole board coming soon.
Oh, it's arrived.
Oh my gosh. Have you started playing it yet?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have. So, yeah, I have a crokinole board that arrived, and the surface is like ice. So I don't know how long it's going to stay that way, but almost like your ice cool penguins, those things just travel in ways that you wouldn't like. They go so far and so fast, and everything's so bouncy that it's a crazy game. So the kids have all come down to play that, but it's more of a 2-player. You can't get a big group together for that one. And we've been playing, because one of my kids is a real sniper on that game. We've been playing by tournament rules. So you've got to keep yourself seated when you take those shots. You can't stand up and move around the board. Or else you're in big trouble with dad.
It's in the rules. You can't do it. But really, other than that, the only other one that we have that not necessarily gets you up and moving around, but it's more active, is called Whoosh. And this is a stronghold game. It is cute. I totally honest, I bought it at Gen Con because of the cute monster on the front. Not even gonna lie. It was an impulse buy that was adorable. I judged a book by its cover, and I picked up a game, and I was not sad about it. And it's a game kind of like Slapjack a little bit, but a little more complicated, because you've got 3 monsters that are coming towards your town, and you are townspeople trying to capture these cute monsters. And so each monster has a series of icons that will capture them. So usually it's like 2 arrows, a sword, a fireball, and an ice ball, or whatever. And each of you, as the hunters on the outside, are flipping a card one at a time. And as soon as you kind of lay them all out, as soon as all of the icons for that particular monster are met, the first one to slap it gets it. So it becomes a memory game of trying to remember what icons are on the table, and there's 3 monsters out that each require different icons, and so you're trying to keep track of all these things. And that one, I will say, most people end up standing up for after a while, just because they're like, okay, I have to see everything. I can't see everything. And so that's probably the only other one aside from Ice School that we have that's a more active game. But yeah.
Wow. So now, one of the things I wanted to make sure, I know we're coming up to the end of our time together, but one of the things I wanted to make sure that I talked about before we ended our chat were, do you have any recent sort of favorite family gaming moments, anything that's come up that's really stood out for you that we haven't already talked about yet?
Rachel, you got one?
Thinking.
So we just carefully met up with one of my old high school friend. I'm good friends with her and her brothers. And so we were able to kind of plan and safely get together at a house over a weekend and just kind of spend some time together. And we taught them 5 Tribes. And 5 Tribes is I know it's Rachel and Jacques' favorite game. It's really high up there for me. I love 5 Tribes. And so I hadn't played it very often, but we played it with my friend and her husband. And then I don't think my husband played. I think it was Tyler. One of our other friends played, and it was really fun because the couple we were playing with are just getting past the gateway games. You know what I mean? Like they've been into the gateway games, and they're just getting into that. And so it was really fun at the end when we were all battling for points because you're trying to figure out the best way to not let other people get good moves, but get your own good moves and get the things you want. And we had a 20-minute conversation about how we could help Lisa win because she was so close, but I had enough products in front of me that we were pretty sure I had it. I mean, we hadn't counted up points yet, but we spent a good amount of time sitting there trying to kind of help each other figure out how to win. And that was just kind of fun. It was just good, healthy competition. Like, hey, what's the best move here? What could she do to make it so that she could win? But yeah, she didn't. I still won, but but it was cool. It was kind of a fun moment to just sit and talk about. I think that's a really good next step for a gateway, like for just gateway gamers, where there is a little bit of analysis paralysis though. But if you're looking for kind of a puzzly game, that's the next step. I think 5 Tribes is a good one.
Awesome. Rachel, do you have one?
I do. So this was a little while ago, but my parents were up visiting. They live in Indiana, actually not too far from Indianapolis, conveniently. So I'm looking forward to Gen Cons in the future. But we were actually playing Azul, and my mom, the first time she plays a game, she asks lots of questions, and I think she pretends that she's not catching on. But the second time she plays that game with you, she will wipe the floor with you. And so my mom and dad were up, and my husband and I were playing Azul with them, and we were tallying up points at the end, and my mom just, by a long shot, just crushed us. And Jacques turns to me and my husband, and he goes, "Rachel, tell your mom to go home." It was so funny because they're best buds, my mom and my husband. So it was silly, but I think another just great. It wasn't a family party at all. It was an adult dinner party that I had recently. We busted out Ice Cool, and we were laughing so hard. It was great because I had people that don't typically like to game or don't really like complicated games. And so I brought out Ice Cool, and we were just like 4 kids running around the table. It was a lot of fun.
So good. Good. Well, thank you so much, Rachel and Jenna, for joining me today. I'm glad it all worked out.
Yes.
This all happened. We all met one another through a Facebook post where I said, it would be fun to meet up with some of the people who are creating, game-based content on the internet. So I'm glad we were able to do this today.
I am too. It was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, super nice meeting you as well. Thanks for joining me.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again to Jenna and Rachel for joining me on the show. If you are interested in hearing more from them, you can track them down wherever you download podcasts. Just search for the Friendly Local Game Pod. If you have any questions or suggestions for me, you can find me, as always, at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website where you'll find the previous episodes and future episodes of the show will go there. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to be notified when more episodes get posted, all you have to do is head on over to YouTube and press that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.